So my parents actually met and fell in love in Cleveland, Ohio. They did not know each other in the Philippines, which is something of a different experience than a lot of my friends who, of my generation, my age, where I think a lot of my friends, if their parents were coming from the Philippines, they knew each other in the Philippines and they came over together. So my parents had two separate, very different ways of coming into this country, though they both came in the late 60s, 1960s. My father is the second youngest out of 13 children in his family, very large family. And his father had been an Army scout for the U.S. Army during wartime in the Philippines. And through that experience, his father was able to get, green cards and then eventually citizenship for his entire family, which is very huge. And so my father's older brother first came to this country, so that would be my Uncle Sandy, came to this country first to San Francisco. And my father and my father's older sister, later on in the 1960s, followed their brother to San Francisco. And so my father first came to the United States via San Francisco. My mom also came in the late 1960s. She had a very different entry into this country. She is the eldest daughter and the second eldest of 8 children. And she was very serious, my mom, as a child and as a person. And I think incredibly reliable. And so her family, they came from a province called Tarlac in the Philippines. They were not very wealthy. They didn't have a lot of resources, but they invested a lot in their children's schooling, especially in my mother, I think, because she was serious and she was responsible and reliable, and they thought she is going to be responsible about her job and be able to help provide for the rest of the family. So they really invested in her education and in her becoming a doctor. So my mother was a doctor in the Philippines, and at a certain point, one of my grandparents' family friends was wealthy and was coming to the United States. So my mother kind of tagged along with them to come to the United States. And then my mom stayed here. And her first point of entry was in New York City. And so my mom actually, her first point of entry was living in Brooklyn, which is always, kind of a tickle point for me, because my family, I now live in Brooklyn, and my mother now, when she comes into New York City and sees Brooklyn or New York City, she finds it so overwhelming. And I always think back to the fact that my mother coming from her province to Brooklyn to New York City must have been incredibly overwhelming. So she first came in via Brooklyn. She eventually went to work at a hospital in Ohio, and that hospital actually ended up sponsoring her there was a shortage of doctors at the time in the United States, so they sponsored her to become a green card holder and then a citizen, and that was kind of her story. But my parents met at a party of other Filipinos all in Ohio, and then my father would drive to meet my mom. But that's how my family came together.